Rain came down like it meant to wash the world clean, pounding the hard ground and turning the old trail into a river of mud. Most folks would have taken shelter long before the sky broke open like that, but the frontier had never been gentle with anyone, and it was not about to start now. The wind carried the smell of wet earth and smoke, and somewhere beyond the curtain of rain, a horse cried out, sharp and frightened. It was the kind of sound that pulled a person out of hiding, even when common sense said stay put. She had not meant to be out there when the storm hit. No one ever did. One moment the sky was low and gray, the next it was tearing itself apart. Her dress clung heavy to her legs, soaked through, and every step felt like walking against the current of a river. She tasted iron in her mouth, fear mixed with rain, and her hand shook as she tried to keep moving. The land around her was wide and unforgiving, all scrub and stone, shaped by time and blood. Old American ground, people said, where every mile carried a story and most of them ended badly. She slipped on the wet clay and nearly went down, catching herself on a thorn bush that bit into her palm. Pain flared, sharp and real, and it grounded her for a second. She lifted her head, blinking rain from her eyes, and that was when she saw him. He stood just off the trail, solid as the rocks behind him, rain running off his dark hair and shoulders like it did not dare linger. An Apache, broad-backed, steady, watching her the way a hawk watches a field, not cruel, not kind, just aware. They stared at each other through the rain, both measuring, both weighing the risk. Stories had taught her fear before she ever met a man like him. Stories told in low voices by firelight, full of warning and blame. But the storm did not care for stories, and neither did the ground that was trying to pull her under. Another step and her foot slid again, this time for good. She went down hard, breath knocked from her chest, mud cold against her skin. Before she could push herself up, he was there. One strong arm came around her, lifting her clear of the sucking ground, rough not in cruelty but in urgency. She gasped, more from surprise than pain, her hands clutching at his wet sleeve. Rain ran down his face into his eyes, but his grip did not falter. He set her on her feet, closer than she had ever been to a man she did not know, close enough to feel the heat of him even through the storm. "Do not be gentle," she heard herself say, the words torn from her by fear and the wildness of the moment. "I need you rough." What she meant was clear to her even if it sounded wrong. She needed him steady. She needed him strong. The land had no mercy, and neither could he, not if they were going to make it through what was coming. For a second, something flickered in his eyes, a look that held a lifetime of knowing what it meant to survive. He did not answer with words. He shifted his hold, firm hands at her waist, lifting her again when her legs failed. The rain soaked them both, thunder cracking so close it rattled her bones. Somewhere nearby, water rushed hard and fast, a dry wash turning deadly in minutes. He turned them toward higher ground, moving with the ease of someone who knew this land in all its moods. Each step was sure, even as the storm tried to tear them apart. As they climbed, she became aware of everything at once. The smell of rain on hot stone, the scrape of his boots on rock, the way his breath stayed calm while hers came fast and shallow. She wondered who he was, what had brought him out in a storm like this, and whether trusting him was the smartest or most foolish thing she had ever done. The old world she came from felt far away, washed out by the rain, replaced by something raw and immediate. They reached a narrow ledge just as a wall of water roared past below them, carrying branches and debris, proof of how close she had come to being swept away. He set her down again, keeping a hand on her arm until she found her balance. For a moment, they stood there together, rain falling, danger rushing by, the space between them charged with things unsaid. She looked up at him, really looked, and saw not the monster from the stories, but a man marked by weather and time, eyes dark and searching. She wanted to thank him, but the words tangled in her throat. What could she say that would bridge the gap between them? a gap dug deep by years of fear and fighting. He seemed to sense her struggle, his grip loosening but not leaving her, as if he knew the ground could still betray her. The storm began to ease, rain softening from a roar to a steady fall, but the tension did not fade with it. In the distance, she heard voices, faint but real, carried on the wet air. Men were looking for her. Men who would not see him the way she did in that moment. Men who would bring guns and old anger and questions that had no good answers. Her heart sank, and she felt the fragile safety of the ledge begin to crumble. She looked back at him, fear and something else twisting together in her chest. He heard it too. His body went still, alert, every line of him ready. He glanced toward the sound, then back at her, and in that brief exchange, she understood that whatever choice came next would change everything. The rain hid them for now, blurring the world into gray streaks, but it would not last forever. Soon, the storm would pass, and with it the thin veil that kept danger at bay. She did not know whether to run toward the voices or stay where she was. She did not know if he would vanish into the land the moment he let go of her arm. All she knew was that the roughness she had asked for was not about hands or strength alone. It was about facing what lay ahead without soft lies or false comfort. The old American land had brought them together in the rain, and it was not done with them yet. As the voices drew closer and the clouds began to break, he made a decision, his jaw setting with quiet resolve. He tightened his grip once more, guiding her toward a narrow cut in the rocks that led away from the trail. She hesitated, torn between fear and trust, between the past she knew and the unknown road opening in front of her. Thunder rolled one last time, low and distant, as if the land itself was holding its breath. She took a step with him into the shadows, rain dripping from her hair, heart pounding hard enough to drown out everything else. Behind them, the voices called her name, closer now, sharper. Ahead of them, the rocks closed in, dark and sheltering, hiding whatever waited beyond. The storm had passed, but something far more dangerous was just beginning, and she had no idea which way would lead her out alive. The narrow cut in the rocks swallowed the sound of the voices behind them, turning sharp calls into dull echoes that bounced and faded. Water dripped from the stone walls, cold and steady, and the air inside smelled of damp earth and age. She moved carefully, boots sliding on slick ground, guided by the firm pressure of his hand at her back. It was not a tender touch, but it was sure, and right then that mattered more than anything else. The passage opened into a shallow overhang just wide enough to offer shelter. From there, the land dropped away into a maze of brush and stone, a place where someone who knew how to read the ground could disappear. He released her slowly, as if testing whether she could stand on her own. She leaned against the rock, chest rising and falling, listening to her own breath and the distant rush of water below. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Silence pressed in, thick with questions. She studied him from the corner of her eye, noting the scars along his hands, the worn leather of his gear, the way he kept watch even while standing still. He belonged to this land in a way she never had. She had come west chasing something she could not name, freedom, maybe, or escape, only to find herself caught between forces far older and stronger than her own plans. The voices outside grew louder again, closer now, men spreading out to search. She recognized one of them, a sharp tone that always carried command. That man believed the land was his to tame, that anything standing in his way was an obstacle to be broken. Her stomach tightened. If they found her here, with him, there would be no room for explanations. The old American frontier did not leave space for understanding, only sides. He crouched near the edge of the overhang, peering out through the curtain of rain. She watched his face, trying to read it. There was no panic there, only focus. When he looked back at her, his gaze lingered, as if weighing her presence against the danger it brought. She wondered if he regretted pulling her from the mud, if saving her had already set something in motion he could not stop. She thought of how she had ended up on that trail in the first place. The promise of work at a trading post that turned out to be nothing more than a rumor. A long walk back toward the settlement, rain threatening, pride keeping her from turning around sooner. She had always believed she could handle herself, that strength alone would see her through. Now, leaning against cold stone, she understood how thin that belief had been. A shout rang out closer than before, followed by the splash of boots through water. She flinched despite herself. He raised a hand, a silent signal to stay still. The gesture was calm, practiced, and it steadied her nerves more than words could have. This was not the first time he had hidden from men who hunted without understanding what they were chasing. As they waited, she noticed small details she would have missed before. A faint marking on the rock wall, almost worn away, the kind used to signal safe paths or danger. The way the ground sloped just enough to carry water away from where they stood. This place had been chosen with care. It told a story of survival passed down through generations, knowledge earned the hard way. The voices drifted past, frustrated, confused by the storm and the broken trail. One man cursed the rain, another blamed poor tracking. Slowly, the tension eased just enough for her to breathe without fear of being heard. She closed her eyes for a second, letting the sound of the rain fill her ears, grounding herself in the present. When she opened them again, he was watching her differently now, less like a rescuer measuring a burden, more like someone trying to understand a stranger who had crossed into his world. She wanted to ask him who he was, where he was going, why he had been out there alone. The questions crowded her mind, but she kept them to herself. Words felt dangerous, capable of breaking whatever fragile balance held them hidden. Instead, she whispered a simple thank you, barely louder than the rain. He inclined his head, neither accepting nor refusing it, as if gratitude was another thing the frontier had taught him to take lightly. Survival did not leave much room for thanks. Time stretched, measured by the slow drip of water and the distant movement of men who did not yet know when to give up. She wondered how long they could stay there. Night would come soon, and with it colder air and new risks. Staying hidden might keep her safe from one danger only to expose her to another. He seemed to sense her thoughts. He gestured toward the brush below, then to the far ridge, outlining a path with his hand. She understood enough to know he meant to move once the search passed. Following him would mean leaving the known road entirely, stepping into land that did not belong to maps or rules she understood. The idea frightened her more than she expected. Yet when she imagined stepping back onto the trail and into the arms of the men calling her name, her fear sharpened into something worse. Choice weighed heavy, and she realized that whatever she decided would bind her to consequences she could not see yet. The voices faded at last, retreating toward the trail, the men convinced the storm had erased her tracks for good. Relief washed through her, but it was not clean or simple. It left behind questions and a quiet dread of what came next. The rain slowed to a mist, clouds lifting enough to show a pale strip of sky. He moved first, stepping out from the overhang and testing the ground. She followed, heart hammering, every sense alert. The land looked different now, softened by rain, shadow shifting. It felt like crossing a line, from one life into another, though nothing visible marked the change. As they descended toward the brush, she glanced back once, toward the trail and the direction of the settlement. It already felt distant, like something seen through glass. Ahead of her stretched the wild, full of promise and threat in equal measure. She did not know how far she would go with him, or how long their paths would run together. He paused at the edge of the thicket, turning to face her fully for the first time since the storm. His expression was serious, unreadable, but there was no force in his stance. He was offering a choice without words. Stay with him, or turn back alone. Her answer came not in speech, but in movement. She stepped forward into the brush, accepting the risk. Behind them, the trail lay quiet, washed clean by rain. Ahead, the old American land waited, holding its secrets close, and the tension between them hung heavy, unbroken, as the story pressed on toward whatever the next dawn would bring. They moved through the brush with care, every branch pushed aside slowly, every step placed with purpose. The ground was softer here, rain-soaked and quiet, hiding their passage. She kept close behind him, close enough to see how his shoulders shifted when he listened, how his head turned at the faintest sound. This was not just movement, it was a language, one she did not yet understand but was beginning to respect. The land opened into a shallow basin where the rain had settled into wide pools that reflected the darkening sky. Mist hovered low, blurring distance and making shapes out of shadows. She felt exposed there, the open space offering no cover if someone followed. He seemed to sense that too and led her along the edge, where rocks and tall grass broke their outline. Survival here was about thinking ahead, about knowing where danger might rise before it did. As they walked, her thoughts kept circling back to the men who had been calling her name. They were not strangers. One had offered her work with a smile that never reached his eyes. Another had watched her too closely, as if weighing her worth. She had learned early on that in places like this, being alone made you vulnerable, but being tied to the wrong people could be worse. Whatever they wanted from her, it was not concern. He stopped near a cluster of trees twisted by wind and age. Their branches reached low, forming a natural screen. He crouched and studied the ground, then looked up at her. This time he spoke, his voice low and steady, shaped by the land itself. He asked where she had come from and why those men were searching so hard. His words were simple, but the weight behind them was not. She told him enough to make sense, but not everything. She spoke of traveling west, of promises made and broken, of realizing too late that she had been seen as something to be claimed rather than a person choosing her own path. She did not speak of the fear that had followed her since she left the settlement that morning, or the feeling that the trail itself had been pushing her toward this moment. He listened without interrupting, eyes on her face, not judging, not doubting. When she finished, he nodded once. He told her that the land remembered those who took more than they gave, that men who moved through it with hunger in their hearts often left trouble behind them. His people had learned long ago to read that kind of sign. They rested there for a while, letting the storm clouds drift apart. As the light changed, she became aware of how tired she was, not just from walking, but from holding herself tight against a world that seemed determined to press in on her. Sitting on the damp ground, she felt the ache in her legs, the sting in her scraped palm. He noticed and handed her a strip of cloth, clean and folded, for her hand. The gesture was practical, kind without softness. As they prepared to move again, a distant sound reached them, the low call of a horn or whistle carried on the wind. Her heart jumped. He stiffened, listening. That sound was not meant for her ears. It was a signal, one used to gather men spread across open ground. The search had not ended. It had widened. From his reaction, she understood that this was no simple pursuit. The men were organized, determined, and willing to cross lines others would not. The frontier was full of quiet conflicts like this, battles fought not in open war but in shadow and rumor. Being caught between them could cost more than freedom. He led her toward higher ground again, angling away from the sound. As they climbed, he explained in short phrases that the men searching were not only after her. They were looking for an excuse, a reason to push deeper into land they had been warned away from. A missing woman made a good story, one that could justify violence. Her presence here gave them exactly what they wanted. The weight of that settled heavy on her. She had not meant to become a spark for something larger, but intent did not matter. Only outcome did. She asked him why he did not simply leave her behind, why he risked drawing trouble to himself. He answered without hesitation that leaving her would not stop what was coming. It would only change who paid the price first. As night crept in, the temperature dropped. They found shelter beneath a rock shelf, deeper and more hidden than the first. From there, they could see the faint glow of lanterns far below, men moving like fireflies across the dark land. She watched them with a mix of fear and anger, realizing how small she must look to them from a distance, just another figure to be recovered or erased. He tended a small, careful fire hidden from view, its smoke guided out through cracks in the stone. As the warmth spread, he spoke of his people, of the pressure that had been building for years as more settlers came, more trails cut across sacred ground. Every search like this brought new eyes, new claims. He was not just protecting her, he was guarding something far older. Listening to him, she began to see the wider shape of the conflict. It was not just about one woman lost in a storm or one Apache choosing to help her. It was about who belonged where, who decided what land was worth, and who paid when those decisions were made with force. The old American frontier thrived on such questions, leaving them unanswered until blood settled the matter. Sleep came in short stretches, broken by sound and thought. She dreamed of rain turning into fire, of trails that led nowhere. When she woke, the fire was low and he was awake, watching the dark. Dawn was still hours away, but movement below suggested the men were not resting. Their patience worried him more than their numbers. At first light, they moved again, skirting ridges and narrow paths only someone raised on this land would know. Along the way, they came across signs of recent passage, broken brush, a dropped glove. The searchers were spreading farther than expected. Each sign tightened the knot in her chest. They reached a place where the land dropped sharply into a canyon, its walls steep and slick from rain. Crossing would be dangerous, but staying on their side might be worse. He studied the canyon, then the sky, calculating. She trusted his judgment now more than her own, though fear still followed every step. As they began the descent, a shout echoed from above. A figure appeared on the ridge, silhouetted against the pale sky. He had seen movement. She froze, heart pounding. He pulled her down behind a rock, pressing her close to the stone, his hand firm over hers to keep her still. They waited, breath held, listening as more voices joined the first. The men were closer now, their presence pressing in like the storm had earlier. There was no turning back, no easy path forward. The canyon yawned below them, dark and uncertain. Above them, the ridge filled with sound and shadow. She realized that whatever happened next would push the conflict into something open, something that could no longer be hidden by rain or night. He met her gaze, eyes steady despite the danger closing in. In that look, she saw resolve and warning both. The land had brought them together, but it was also testing them, asking what they were willing to risk. As the voices grew louder and boots scraped stone above, the tension tightened to a breaking point, and the canyon waited, holding its breath along with them. The shout from above cut through the canyon like a blade. Stones rattled loose as men shifted on the ridge, their voices bouncing off the walls and multiplying until it sounded like there were more of them than there truly were. She pressed herself tighter against the rock, heart pounding so hard she was sure it could be heard. The air smelled of wet stone and fear, sharp and clean at the same time. He leaned close, his voice barely a breath against her ear, telling her to stay low and follow only when he moved. His calm steadied her more than any promise could have. Above them, a lantern swung into view, its light sweeping the rocks, searching for signs of movement. Every second stretched, heavy with the chance of discovery. The canyon was both a threat and a refuge. Its steep walls could trap them, but its twists and shadows could also hide them. He chose a narrow path that hugged the rock face, one foot placed after another with care. She followed, hands scraping stone, legs trembling, trusting him with every step. Water dripped from above, cold drops hitting her neck and shoulders, making her flinch despite herself. Behind them, the men argued. Some wanted to climb down. Others warned against it, speaking of unstable ground and bad footing after the storm. Their hesitation bought time, but not much. She knew that once they committed, there would be no easy escape. The frontier did not forgive mistakes, and neither would those men. As they descended deeper, the light faded, replaced by a cool blue shadow. The sound of the search dulled, muffled by stone. Her breathing slowed just enough for her to think. She wondered how a simple decision to walk a trail had led her here. Balanced between sky and stone, her fate tied to a man she had met only hours before. The thought should have terrified her, yet it did not. There was clarity in it, a sense that this moment mattered more than all the careful plans she had once made. They reached a ledge wide enough to stand on. Below it, the canyon floor opened into a winding path choked with brush. He studied it, then looked back up. More lantern light flickered along the rim. The men were spreading out, determined now. The search had teeth. He motioned for her to wait while he checked the path ahead. As he moved away, a sharp fear grabbed her chest. She realized how quickly she had come to rely on his presence, how exposed she felt without it. When he returned, he carried a small bundle of dry reeds tucked into his belt. He explained that the canyon floor would hide their tracks better, but the way down would be dangerous. They moved again, slower now, each step deliberate. Loose gravel shifted underfoot, sending small slides of stone skittering into the dark. Each sound made her wince, imagining it carrying upward. Above them, a voice called out, closer than before. Someone had spotted movement, or thought they had. The tension wrapped around her like wire. They reached the bottom just as a lantern appeared directly overhead, its light spilling down the rock face. They pressed themselves into the brush, barely breathing. The lantern swung, paused, then moved on. A curse followed, frustrated and sharp. She closed her eyes, silently counting her breaths until the danger passed. Once the voices faded again, he led her along the canyon floor, using the sound of running water to mask their movement. The path twisted and turned, revealing pockets of open ground and sudden walls of stone. The land here felt ancient, untouched by trails or fences. It felt like a place that chose who it allowed to pass. As they moved, he spoke quietly of a settlement hidden beyond the next ridge, a place where his people traded and rested when they needed to stay unseen. It was not permanent, he said, but it was safe. Hearing that word stirred something in her chest she had not felt in a long time. Safe had begun to feel like a story told to children, not a real place. The men above grew louder again, their voices echoing down into the canyon as they tried to coordinate. One voice stood out, commanding and confident. She recognized it instantly. That man would not give up easily. He believed the land owed him answers. She believed he would take them by force if he had to. They climbed out of the canyon on the far side, using a narrow break in the rock that was nearly invisible unless you knew where to look. Her hands burned, muscles shaking with effort, but she did not complain. Every scrape and bruise felt like a small price for the chance to keep moving. At the top, the land leveled into rolling ground dotted with juniper and low grass. The sky was clearing now, stars beginning to show, cold and sharp. Moonlight silvered the wet ground, making it harder to hide. He frowned, knowing the same. Darkness was their ally, but light would soon betray them. They moved faster, cutting across open stretches where the ground was firm. In the distance she saw more lanterns, fewer now, but closer. The search was tightening, narrowing in on likely paths. She realized then that the men were not just reacting. They had a plan, one that assumed he would lead her away from the trail and toward shelter. That knowledge raised the stakes. Every choice he made now was being anticipated. To stay ahead, he would have to do something unexpected, something risky. He veered toward a line of old cottonwoods near a dry creek bed, their roots exposed and tangled. It was a dangerous route, easy to twist an ankle or worse, but it offered cover. As they ran, she felt the weight of exhaustion settle deep in her bones. Her breath burned, legs heavy. He slowed just enough to stay with her, adjusting his pace without looking back. That simple act, matching her strength to his, filled her with a fierce determination not to fail. They reached the trees and dropped into the creek bed, following it as it curved toward the ridge he had mentioned earlier. The ground there was soft with leaves and mud, but the scent of water confused the trail. He scattered the dry reeds along their path, brushing them against the ground, breaking patterns. She did not ask how he knew these things. She trusted that he did. The sound of pursuit came again, closer now, boots thudding, voices sharp with urgency. A lantern beam cut through the trees, sweeping dangerously near. She pressed herself into the bank, heart hammering, every sense screaming. He crouched beside her, eyes locked on the light, body ready to move or fight if needed. For a moment, it seemed certain they would be found. The beam lingered, illuminating the mud inches from her face. She could see her own breath in the cold air, a pale cloud she tried desperately to control. Then another voice called out, drawing the searchers away toward a false lead. The lantern swung back, light fading into the trees. Relief hit her so hard she nearly laughed, but she held it in, biting her lip until it hurt. He met her eyes, a brief smile flickering there, gone as quickly as it came. There was no room for celebration yet. The night was still young and the conflict far from finished. They moved on, the ridge rising ahead of them, dark against the stars. Somewhere beyond it lay the hidden settlement and the possibility of rest. Somewhere behind them, men regrouped, unwilling to let go. Each step brought them closer to a turning point, though she could not yet see its shape. As they climbed, the wind picked up, carrying the smell of pine and distant smoke. She felt a strange mix of fear and hope twist together inside her. Whatever awaited them beyond the ridge would change everything. The old American land watched in silence, holding its breath, as they pressed forward toward the edge of something that could either break them or finally let them breathe. The ridge rose gently at the end, not as steep as she had feared, and when they finally crested it, the land opened in a way that took her breath for a different reason. Below them lay a shallow valley cupped by hills, its firelight scattered like fallen stars. Low structures blended into the earth, smoke lifting straight and calm into the night. It was quiet there, not the heavy silence of danger, but the steady quiet of people who knew how to live with the land instead of against it. He slowed and lifted a hand, signaling that they had reached the edge of safety. Her legs trembled as she stopped, the long chase catching up with her all at once. She bent forward, hands on her knees, breathing hard. When she straightened, she realized she was smiling. It surprised her how natural it felt. They descended carefully, moving along a path that revealed itself only when you knew where to look. As they approached, figures emerged from the shadows, alert but not hostile. Voices spoke in a language she did not understand, calm and questioning. He answered them, his tone respectful, familiar. The tension she had carried since the storm finally began to loosen its grip. She was guided toward a fire where warmth spread in gentle waves. Someone handed her a cup of hot broth, rich and grounding. She sipped it slowly, feeling life return to her fingers and toes. No one stared at her as a curiosity or a problem. She was a guest, nothing more and nothing less. That simple dignity meant more than she could say. Word spread quickly through the small settlement. An elder approached, eyes sharp but kind, and listened as he explained what had happened on the trail and in the canyon. When he spoke of the men searching, murmurs rippled through the group. The elder nodded, already understanding the shape of the conflict. This was not new to them. It was another chapter in a long struggle to protect what little peace they had carved out. Plans were made with quiet efficiency. Lookouts would watch the ridges. False trails would be laid. If the men came too close, they would find nothing but empty land and confusion. The settlement had survived by knowing when to stand firm and when to let the land itself do the work of turning threats away. She was given a place to rest, a simple shelter lined with blankets that smelled faintly of smoke and herbs. As she lay there, staring at the dark ceiling, she thought of the trail she had left behind. The fear, the rain, the moment she slipped and everything changed. It felt distant now, like a story told about someone else. Yet she knew it would stay with her, shaping how she moved through the world from here on. At dawn, the settlement stirred with quiet purpose. Children laughed softly near the edge of camp, their voices carrying a hope she had not heard in a long time. She stepped outside and found him watching the eastern sky, where light spilled gold across the hills. For the first time since they met, there was ease in his posture. He told her the lookouts had seen the searchers reach the canyon and turn back. Confusion and frustration had broken their momentum. Without clear signs, without the trail they expected, the men had argued and split up. By midday, they would likely give up, the frontier offering them nothing but more questions. The land had chosen not to reveal its secrets. Relief washed through her, deep and steady. The danger that had chased her through rain and night was finally losing its grip. She thanked him again, this time with more than a whisper. He accepted it with a nod and a small smile, one that reached his eyes. They walked together through the settlement as the day warmed. She learned how the people here lived between worlds, trading when they could, hiding when they must, always listening to the land. It was not an easy life, but it was honest. She felt something settle inside her, a sense that she had been running toward this understanding without knowing it. When the elder spoke with her again, he offered her a choice. She could be guided safely back toward the edge of the territory once the searchers were gone, or she could stay for a time, learn, rest, decide her next step without pressure. The offer was given freely, without expectation. The choice was hers alone. She thought of the settlement she had left, the promises that had drawn her west and then failed her. She thought of the men who had called her name as if it belonged to them. Then she looked at the valley, the hills, the people moving with quiet confidence. She realized she was no longer in a hurry to return to a life that had never truly fit. Days passed, then weeks. The men who had searched faded into rumor, their anger turned elsewhere. The land closed behind them, erasing their footprints as it always did. She learned the rhythms of the settlement, helped where she could, listened more than she spoke. Strength, she discovered, did not always roar. Sometimes it worked quietly, shaping the future one careful choice at a time. Her bond with him deepened in simple ways. Shared work, shared silence, shared laughter when a stubborn mule refused to cooperate. There was no rush, no need to define what was growing between them. It was built on trust earned in rain and danger, and that foundation felt strong. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the valley in warm light, she stood at the edge of the ridge again. The trail she had once walked was hidden from view, but she knew it was there, winding back toward a past she no longer feared. He joined her, standing shoulder to shoulder, both of them looking out at the land that had tested and protected them. She told him she wanted to stay, not as someone hiding, but as someone choosing. He listened, then nodded, accepting her decision as he had accepted everything else, without claiming ownership or control. In that moment, she understood that belonging was not about being taken in. It was about being welcomed as you were. The old American land stretched wide around them, scarred and beautiful, full of hard lessons and quiet grace. It had brought together two lives at a breaking point and shown them another way forward. As night fell and the first stars appeared, she felt a peace she had never known, one earned through fear, courage, and choice. The storm that had started it all was long gone, washed into memory. In its place stood something steadier, built not on running or chasing, but on standing together. The frontier would always be wild, always demanding, but she was no longer alone on its edge. And for the first time since she had turned west, she knew she was exactly where she was meant to be.